So I like to tell the story of Rachel Mofakim, Rachel from Ofakim. So, because today is the eve of a holiday, but it's very hard to forget that a year ago, one of our holidays, Simchat Torah, was one of the worst days in Jewish history. So on October 7th, this elderly couple, Rachel and her husband David, were sitting down to have coffee when they heard sirens, and terrorists invaded their city. Their son is a police officer, and he cautioned them. And what can they do against 5 armed terrorists that invaded their home? They're 30 kilometers from Gaza, and these terrorists came and they were shooting people, and they shot their neighbor's dog, they shot the neighbors, and then they came to them and they held them hostage for 20 hours. Rachel was a hero because she didn't lose her cool. She was of course panicking, but she didn't show it. She spoke Arabic, so she was able to communicate to them, which is so sad because you can see how we could have been friends, but somehow this extreme Islamic ideology brainwashed these people into thinking they're shaheeds, martyrs that should kill as many Jews as possible and take over their homes. So this guy, one of them was wounded, and she was helping put a bandage on him so he doesn't bleed to death. And she was talking to him, "Are you married?" Talking to him in Arabic. She learned Arabic from her husband, who was from Morocco, and he spoke Arabic. And she's from Iran originally. And she's talking to him in Arabic, and she's asking him, "Are you married? Are you single?" And he says to her, I'm married, I have 4 children. And she says, "Don't you want to go back to your children?" And he says, "I'm a shaheed, I'm a martyr." So she spends time with these people, and it's not a happy time. They're holding, one of them is holding a grenade and a gun to her head at all times. So she's on the top floor of her home, and at the bottom floor are the army soldiers, police officer, and her son. Now the terrorists see the police uniform, and they say, "Who is the police officer?" And she says her son is in America, and because she doesn't want them to know that her son is a police officer in the city. And can you imagine witnessing your elderly parents, being held hostage by terrorists and being helpless to do anything about it? So the son had to keep composure, he had to keep calm, while the police officers were trying to negotiate with the terrorists, and they wanted a car to go back to Gaza. And I don't know why it took 20 hours, but they were shooting, and miraculously no one was harmed. Like David and Rachel were not harmed, but David he experienced really strong emotional stress. They're very loving couple, and they've been together for many years. And his mental health was influenced by the hostage situation, where he saw his wife being held hostage by terrorists and he could do nothing about it. At one point he laid on her so when the police invaded, so she wouldn't be harmed. And then he got into a very bad health situation and into a coma, and he died 4 months later. And it's a big tragedy that she lost her husband. And you can imagine 20 hours being held hostage by terrorists and trying to communicate to them and feeding them, giving them cookies and coffee, and she had to taste the coffee. They were suspicious that it might be poisoned, and singing with them Israeli songs. Apparently they like Israeli music, which is so weird. How the Palestinians, they know the music of Middle Eastern Israelis, and they like Leon Narkis, an Israeli singer, and yet they want to kill us. It's so weird, because they live with us, they speak Hebrew, and yet they work in Israel, and yet They have no problem murdering people that they work with. It's so odd for me how somebody could turn on their neighbors like that. And the way they invaded Israel and people's homes and killed people without thinking it's wrong. And saying Allah Akbar, God is great, without thinking God says, it says in the Ten Commandments that are the basis for all religions, monotheistic religion, thou shalt not kill. How can you come and kill people that have done nothing to you? An elderly couple celebrating a holiday, an elderly woman who's so kind and has had such a difficult life. You know, she comes from a big family and she's always worked hard and given so much to her family, and just finding herself in such a horrible situation, being held hostage in her own home. So people should know this story, and it's a miracle they survived. And there are a lot of heroes in this story. The police officers, the army, the son who managed to keep calm, and the husband who managed to keep calm, the woman who managed to talk to the terrorists and befriend them so they don't murder her like they did all their neighbors. So it's important to keep cool in such a situation, and sometimes it doesn't help though, because there's so many people murdered because the terrorists just didn't care, and they were really lucky that somehow the terrorists managed to feel something for this woman and didn't execute her. But most of the terrorists killed the Israelis and also Arabs, by the way, in cold blood. So it's so sad that this ideology is supposed to be religious and yet it calls to kill people. It's so weird, because in Judaism you kill somebody who threatens your life, like you're in immediate danger, but not just somebody who's about to kill you. You don't just break into somebody's home and just kill them for nothing. And so sad. It's such a tragedy that these people are brainwashed in this terrible ideology, and they're being taught that it's a wonderful thing to kill people, because in Judaism, you know, our ideology is life. Life is the most important thing, and it's so sad that these people are brainwashed. Also in Lebanon, it's so sad, so sad. Such a big tragedy for them, more for the Jews, that they can kill people so mercilessly. They can celebrate death. It's just satanic. It's really sad, and you should watch this documentary. And I don't know if I could say happy holidays, because I still feel very sad. It's only been a year, and it's like we're experiencing every day rocket attacks in the north of Israel and central Israel sometime, and it's just sad, tragic. People dying, and just for what? For just the stupid terrorists who brainwash other people, to other stupid terrorists to want to murder and kill people. For what? For nothing. 99.9% of this land is controlled by Muslims, and we can't even have our tiny land. It's just really sad. It's the worst case of fanatic religious bigotry, and it's so sad that people around the world don't always recognize it and do weapons embargo in Israel. Who, you know, we're fighting for our existence here, and you know, it's just disgusting the way Germany does it, a weapons embargo in Israel, France, all these countries that, you know, they gave the Jews to the Nazis in just 75 years ago, and now they're putting a weapon embargo on Jews fighting for their existence. And you know, as for the situation in Gaza, well, you know, it's very sad that these people allowed terrorists to take over and cooperated with them. Same thing for the United Nations Peace Corps. Instead of keeping peace, they allowed the Hezbollah to take over Lebanon, and actually they caused the situation. They caused the situation by allowing them to dig terror tunnels. You know, if the Israeli army hadn't gone into Lebanon, they would have done October 7th again from the north. They were about to invade Israeli villages and towns and did the same thing as October 7th, and it's absolutely disgusting. There are people that think it's justified in any way, shape or form. It's just so much ignorance, And also the Democratic Party, I think, is a disaster for Israel. The way they think it's a balance, it's like tit for tat. You can't compare it to a democratic country where 25% are Muslim Arabs to bigot, fanatic countries ruled by terrorists with this fanatic Islamic terror that the same as 9/11, and you actually justify them. It's disgusting that so-called liberal people think that this is freedom fighters. They're terrorists. They just want to murder people, and they don't care at all about peace. They don't care about coexistence, and they don't even care about Arabs. In the recent terror attack where an Israeli police officer was shot, an Arab man driving was also shot and almost killed. If you think about the fact that we have so many Arabs living here, they're targeted just as much, and the people in Gaza are targeted by terrorists that control Gaza, and they don't give them a good standard of living, that's for sure. And to teach children to become murderers and shaheed, martyrs, whatever, is really sad for the children. Israeli children are taught to go to the army maybe, but first of all, peace and love and coexistence. I just think it's completely different ideologies, and if you don't know the difference, it's really sad. And I think a lot of people are so ignorant, and just because you have a PhD in the university doesn't mean you know history. There's so much misinformation and so many false narratives, and it's so sad. I think the saddest thing is when you don't have critical thinking and when you don't know anything about the history of the Middle East or what fanatic Islamic ideology does. And it's so sad that the people that's supposed to be for human rights are doing exactly the opposite. And instead of supporting Israel and allowing Israel to fight for its existence, a tiny nation, they do quite the opposite. People that have done nothing but give the nations of the world knowledge in science and art and music and literature are being treated as if we are the Satans and we are the evil. We just had Nobel Prize in science given to 2 Jewish scientists, and Jews are only 0.001% of the world population, only 14 million, but there's like 2 billion Muslims, and they're so focused on this murder ideology that sadly they don't really focus on science and knowledge and art and literature as much as they did in the Middle Ages, when actually Islamic people were developing mathematics and science, and somehow this fanatic ideology just made them stupid and evil. It's really sad. Really, really sad. Yes, I see that there is, again, sirens. Every day I see sirens in the north of Israel. And I don't understand the Christian world and the Pope. This is the place where the main figure of your religion, Jesus, he lived in North Israel. Sea of Galilee, all these places, Nazareth, are being targeted, and yet the Pope is silent the way he was in the Holocaust. And it's just so sad. Of course, not all Christians, but Christians that are silent is tragic, and Christians that accuse Israel is even more tragic. And people that don't know anything about what's going on and don't know about anything about the ideology of extreme fanatic terrorist Islamic terrorism. It's so sad. They don't really understand what these people do and how they use the name of God to do satanic acts of the most violent crimes known to mankind. And it's just tragic. And the more I learn about October 7th, the more I realize how we're really fighting for existence here. And I just feel it. And I try to be like Rachel of Sderot, because this is the way I was brought up. I try to smile and laugh and survive, but it takes its toll on your mental health, that's for sure. Thank God I have this cat here to keep me. But so many people and animals being killed and harmed. And you can't just say to Israel, stop fighting, because if we stop fighting, they're going to invade us. They're going to throw rockets, and they are throwing rockets right now, and you can't just say to people to stop defending ourselves. Stop fighting is just telling Israel to stop defending ourselves, and that is basically telling us to be sitting ducks. We're already in a Russian roulette. Any minute now a rocket can just hit. Unmanned flying vehicle can come in here. It's pretty scary if you think about it, so I try not to think about it, and I try to focus on the heroes, people that kept calm under stressful situation. But to say that it doesn't take its toll on mental health, there's so many people who live with a lot of anxiety, and on both sides, but the terrorists are absolutely, inexcusably the evildoers, and they've got to be stopped. And to stop the war is to allow the terrorists to invade and to continue the rockets, and that is absolutely unacceptable. So all those countries who do a weapons embargo in Israel, they should just be ashamed, because they're actually cooperating with the Nazis the way they did during World War II. And I absolutely urge Americans to vote for Donald Trump, because God help us if these so-called liberal people that just think we can just stop the war and it will end and we won't be in danger is ridiculous. Kamala Harris just says, stop the war, stop self-defense, is actually saying, why don't you just die? Why don't you just allow terrorists to invade your homes, keep you hostage, murder your babies, rape your women, take hostages? And what about the hostages? They just don't seem to care at all about the hostages still being kept in Gaza. They just care that the people in Gaza get aid, but they cooperated with the terrorists. And they should really, in our world, people have to accept the consequences to their actions. If you invade your neighbor and celebrate their murder, rape, and kidnapping, then I don't think you should receive any help. It's just the way the law of karma works. If you are being evil and cooperate with evil satanic force, then you have to pay the price. We're not the bad guys, that's for sure. It's really sad that people are killed in a war, but they paid the price for supporting terrorists. And the UN is a shameless organization. The UN peacekeepers have caused Lebanon war number 1, 2, and now 3, because they just, under their watch, during the time they are there, supposedly watching out and separating the sides and keeping peace, they're allowing terrorists to store arms and to dig terror tunnels. And it's like 50 meters away from where they are. They see it. They absolutely cannot have ignored seeing the terrorists digging tunnels and rockets and all these huge missiles being brought into the border with Israel, and yet they did nothing. And then they present themselves as victims when the Israeli army comes in there to do what they're supposed to do, to stop the terrorists from invading Israel, and they just do nothing. They are the worst hypocrites in the world. The Irish peacekeepers, or the ones who are there, they are the worst. They are the absolute worst people on the face of this planet. You come to keep peace, and yet you allow terrorists to build up arms for 20 years. And Israeli soldiers sacrifice their life. They die because of these stupid UN soldiers who do nothing to stop terrorists. And this is their mission. They're supposed to stop terrorists, which is why Israeli army cannot count on anybody else. And it's really sad that Israel is actually fighting the war of the West, because I'm sure no Western country would want these terrorists invading their homes and holding their elderly parents hostage. In a way, I'm grateful I don't have elderly parents. They just, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, they shot a rocket. No, it wasn't a rocket. It was an unmanned flying object airplane into a nursing home, mostly Holocaust survivors from Holland. and fortunately nobody was well, there were a few injured, but not that bad, because they managed to get all these elderly people into safety, to bomb shelters. But you know, when you say, well, how come Israelis have bomb shelters and protection? And because it's a priority, a question of priority. The terrorists don't think about their elderly and their children. They don't build bomb shelters, they build terror tunnels. And this is the big tragedy of the Arab people, that their leaders don't care about them at all. They don't care to protect those poor children, their babies, and women and elderly, because there's no way the Israeli army cannot bomb the rocket launching pads. There's no way we can just ignore it, and there's no way we can stop the war. I hate war, but this is the war of survival. So how can I hate a war of survival when I know if it wasn't for the army, they'd be here and I'd be held hostage, God forbid, my cat and dog shot, and I'd also be in danger of having the same situation. We're not that far from Gaza, you know? We're like an hour and 15 minutes from Gaza, I guess. And it's really scary to think they could have been here. If it wasn't for the Nova Music Festival, their plan was to come here to Central Israel. And I think Northern Israel or Central Israel, it doesn't matter. Everybody should be safe. Everybody should live with rocket attacks. I don't know how these people live day after day. Can you imagine your baby, your child, your elderly people living under constant rocket attack? Every single day there's rocket attacks, and they're going to bomb shelters. This is not a life anyone should live. And the way Europe ignores the suffering of the Jewish people, and even the Arab people, the Jewish and Arab people who live in Israel, is absolutely disgusting and inexcusable. So let's hope Trump wins, and that somehow the world wakes up and fights terror before it comes to your home, before your parents and your children are held hostage and kidnapped. And so I can't say happy holiday really, because I don't feel it. I think we should celebrate holiday, and when I go outside and I see the sukkah, I feel happy, but at the same time I feel so sad for all those people killed, murdered, and the way Israel is demonized in the world, and the way people just don't learn the lesson. They just don't care that Jews are going to be killed if they do the weapons embargo. And I think it's just so sad for people to be so evil and mean and support the satanic people instead of support the only democracy in the Middle East where Jews and Arabs coexist. I mean, every day I go out, I hear Arabic, I see Arab people who work here, and it's just such a tragedy that Israel is so demonized and presented in such a distorted way. So I hope, if this can affect anyone, I just hope it will. I'm just really sad that there's so many people who don't use critical thinking and just get misinformation and just don't have no idea what's really going on. Anyway, I hope peace, light, and love for everybody. Stay safe if you are a good person. And if you're a person that wants to harm, I just hope you wake up one day and realize that satanic ideology doesn't lead to a good place, and definitely not to God.